It was a Saturday evening, and the sun had begun to set, casting long shadows across the living room floor. I had just returned home from a long day at work, looking forward to a quiet evening with my wife, Sarah. The house was unusually quiet, and for a moment I simply stood at the threshold, taking in the familiar scent of her perfume that lingered in the air. I felt a wave of warmth wash over me, a sense of comfort that had always enveloped me when I stepped into our sanctuary. But that evening was different. There was an unsettling feeling gnawing at the back of my mind, one I couldn't quite shake off. I shrugged it off as fatigue. After all, the grind of my corporate job was relentless. I called out her name, my voice echoing in the empty space, but received no reply. The silence began to stretch, and as I walked deeper into the house, I noticed her phone lying on the kitchen counter face up. I hesitated, a knot forming in my stomach. It was an invasion of privacy, I reminded myself. I shouldn't look, but curiosity got the better of me and I picked it up. My heart raced as I unlocked the screen, and there they were, messages that shattered my world. I felt like a character in one of my own novels, caught in a web of deceit and betrayal. The words jumped out at me, searing into my mind. "Can't wait to see you tonight, read one." Another followed, "I miss you so much." They were from a man whose name I didn't recognize, but in that moment it didn't matter. The realization hit me like a punch to the gut. My wife, the woman I loved with all my heart, was cheating on me. Shock coursed through my veins, rendering me momentarily paralyzed. I could feel my breathing quicken and the room began to spin. Anger bubbled up, but it was quickly drowned by disbelief. How could she do this to me? How could she betray the vows we had made to each other? I felt the walls of our home closing in on me, suffocating me with the weight of her deceit. I dropped the phone as if it were a live wire, the sound of it clattering against the tile floor, breaking the stillness of the house. My mind raced with memories, our wedding day, the laughter we shared, the dreams we had built together. All of it felt like a cruel joke now. I had given her my heart, my trust, and in return she had given me betrayal. As I stood there, the weight of betrayal pressed down on my chest, but with each breath I felt a flicker of resolve igniting within me. I could no longer be the man who turned a blind eye, the man who would accept this betrayal as a flaw in our love. I would confront her and I would demand answers. The anger simmering within me began to transform into determination. I would not be a victim in my own life story. I would take control of the narrative, and I would find a way to reclaim my dignity. I turned on my heel, ready to face the truth, ready to confront the woman who had shattered my world. The confrontation loomed over me like a storm cloud, but before I faced Sarah, I needed to sift through the memories that now felt tainted. I poured myself a glass of water, trying to steady my shaking hands, but the tremor in my fingers was a reflection of the turmoil within. I leaned against the kitchen counter, my mind racing back through the years we had spent together. I remembered the first time I met Sarah at a mutual friend's party. She was radiant, her laughter like music that drew me in. I had been instantly captivated by her energy, her passion for life. We spent hours talking, sharing dreams and aspirations, and I felt an inexplicable connection. I had never believed in love at first sight until that moment. The memory of her smile, bright and genuine, flooded my thoughts, but now it felt like a cruel reminder of how easily things could change. Our relationship blossomed quickly. We traveled together, explored new cities, created a life filled with laughter and love. I could still picture our wedding day, her in that stunning white dress, the way she looked at me as we exchanged vows. At that moment, I had felt invincible. We had promised to love each other through thick and thin, to support one another no matter the challenges life threw our way. But now, as I stood in our kitchen, the weight of betrayal settled heavily on my shoulders. I couldn't help but replay our last few months together. There had been signs, hadn't there? Moments when she seemed distant, preoccupied with something I couldn't quite grasp. I had brushed them off as stress from work or the pressures of life, never suspecting that they were symptoms of something far more sinister. I recalled the nights she had come home late, her excuses wrapped in a thin veil of normalcy. "Just a late meeting," she would say, and I would accept it, trusting her without question. I had been blind to the cracks forming in our relationship, convinced that the love we had built was unshakable. But now I felt foolish for ignoring my instincts. The realization stung like a slap to the face. As I reflected on our life together, anger surged within me, but it was mixed with a sense of loss. It was one thing to be betrayed. It was another to mourn the love I thought we shared. I had invested so much of myself into our marriage, and now it felt like I was standing in the ruins of a life I had cherished. But amidst the heartbreak, a flicker of clarity emerged. This was not just about Sarah's betrayal, it was about me reclaiming my identity. I had lost myself in the roles of husband and partner, and now it was time to rediscover who I was outside of our relationship. I couldn't let her actions define me. I had to remember that I was more than just a victim of infidelity. I was a man deserving of respect, love, and loyalty. That thought ignited a fire within me. It was time to confront Sarah, to demand the truth. I wouldn't cower or beg for answers. I would walk into that conversation with my head held high, ready to reclaim my power. As I prepared myself for the inevitable confrontation, I felt a sense of purpose bubbling up within me. I was no longer the naive husband who would accept betrayal quietly. I was a man who would fight for his self-worth. I took a deep breath, steadied my nerves, and made my way toward the living room. The time for reflection was over. It was time to face the reality of our shattered marriage and demand answers. I found Sarah sitting on the couch, her legs crossed and her fingers nervously tapping against her knee. The sight of her brought a rush of memories, her warmth, her laughter, the way her presence could light up a room. But now those memories felt like shards of glass cutting into my heart. I took a moment to gather my thoughts, my resolve hardening with each breath I took. "Sarah," I said, my voice steady but laced with an underlying tension. She looked up, her eyes wide, and I could see the flicker of surprise in her expression. "We need to talk." "'Kay," she replied, her voice barely above a whisper. I could sense her apprehension, but I pushed forward, determined to confront the truth. "I found your phone on the kitchen counter," I began, watching her reaction closely. A shadow crossed her face, and I felt a pang of anger surge within me. "I saw the messages." Her expression shifted from surprise to guilt, and for a moment the silence between us felt suffocating. I could see the realization dawning on her. She knew what I was about to say. "Who is he, Sarah?" I demanded, my voice rising with the weight of my emotions. "How long has this been going on?" She hesitated, her eyes darting away from mine as if seeking an escape from the confrontation. "It's not what you think," she stammered, but her words felt like empty excuses. "Not what I think," I echoed incredulously. "You've been texting another man, planning to meet him. How is that not what I think?" The anger within me was boiling over, but I forced myself to stay calm. I needed answers, not a fight. "Please let me explain," she pleaded, her voice trembling. "It was a mistake. I didn't mean for it to happen." "A mistake?" I interrupted, incredulous. "This isn't just a mistake, Sarah. This is betrayal. You've broken our vows, shattered the trust we built over years." My heart ached as I spoke, each word a reminder of what we had lost. "I know," she said, tears brimming in her eyes. "I messed up. I was feeling lonely. Things have been so hard between us lately. I didn't know how to talk to you about it." Loneliness. The word echoed painfully in my mind. We had shared our lives, our hopes and dreams. How could she feel lonely? "So you chose to cheat instead of talking to me, instead of working on our problems?" I asked, incredulous. "I thought it was just a fling," she said, her voice breaking. "I didn't mean for it to get so serious. I didn't want to hurt you." The weight of her words struck me like a physical blow. I could see the remorse in her eyes, but it was too late. The damage was done, and I could no longer ignore the reality of our situation. "You hurt me, Sarah." "You hurt us," I said, my voice low but firm. "I deserve better than this." As I watched her cry, I felt a mixture of anger and sadness. The woman I had loved was sitting in front of me, but she was also a stranger. I couldn't reconcile the Sarah I knew with the one who had betrayed me. "I need to think," I finally said, my voice steady. I turned to leave the room, but she called out to me. "Please don't go," she begged, her voice cracking. "I want to fix this. I love you, but—" Those words felt hollow now. Love was not enough to mend the trust that had been shattered. "I need space, Sarah," I replied, my heart heavy. "I can't do this right now." As I walked away, I felt an odd mix of relief and despair. The confrontation had been brutal, but I had faced the truth head-on. I was no longer the passive partner, willing to accept whatever came my way. I was standing up for myself, and that realization ignited a spark of empowerment within me. I stepped outside into the cool evening air, the weight of the conversation still hanging heavily on my shoulders. But as I stared up at the stars, I felt a sense of clarity washing over me. I couldn't change what had happened, but I could change my future. The path ahead was uncertain, but I knew one thing for sure. I would not allow this betrayal to define me. I would emerge from the ashes of this relationship stronger than before. The days following the confrontation felt surreal. I had retreated to the spare room, the one that had become a temporary refuge. I didn't want to see Sarah, didn't want to hear her pleas for forgiveness. Instead, I spent my time packing the small space, wrestling with my thoughts. Each step echoed the turmoil in my mind, a constant reminder of the betrayal that had rocked my world. I was caught in a storm of emotions, anger, sadness, and the faintest glimmer of hope for a new beginning. But the more I reflected, the clearer my path became. I realized that I couldn't stay in a relationship built on lies and deceit. I needed to reclaim my life, and to do that, I had to leave. The decision crystallized one evening as I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the empty walls. I felt trapped in a life that no longer felt like mine. I had poured my heart into my marriage only to have it trampled on. I could feel the weight of despair pressing down on me, but within that darkness a flicker of resolve ignited. I would not let this be the end of my story. I stood up, my heart racing as I walked to the closet. I started pulling out my clothes, folding them methodically. Each item felt like a piece of my old life that I was reclaiming. I had shared so much with Sarah in this space, but it was time to take back what was mine and step into a new chapter. I could feel the adrenaline coursing through my veins as I packed my things, the act of physical movement giving me a sense of control. As I laid my clothes in a suitcase, I couldn't help but reflect on the symbolism of what I was doing. Each shirt, each pair of pants represented a piece of my identity, my hopes, my dreams, and the person I had been before the betrayal. I was not just leaving behind a home. I was leaving behind a version of myself that had allowed someone else's actions to dictate my worth. I took a moment to breathe, allowing the significance of my decision to settle in. I was reclaiming my power, stepping away from a relationship that had become toxic. I felt a surge of empowerment wash over me, and for the first time in days I smiled, a genuine smile, full of hope and anticipation for the future. With my suitcase finally packed, I glanced around the room one last time. Memories flooded my mind, both good and bad. I had loved Sarah deeply, but I couldn't ignore the reality that our love had been poisoned by her choices. I was no longer willing to accept the blame for her actions. As I made my way downstairs, I felt a heaviness in my chest. I knew that confronting Sarah again would be painful, but I had to be honest about my decision. I couldn't slip away quietly. She deserved to know why I was leaving. I found her sitting at the kitchen table, her eyes red from crying. The sight of her tugged at my heartstrings, but I steeled myself. "Sarah," I said, my voice firm yet calm, "I've made my decision." She looked up, her expression a mix of hope and fear. "What do you mean?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly. "I'm leaving," I said, my words hanging in the air like a heavy fog. "I can't stay in this relationship. I need to find myself again, and I can't do that with you here, with the pain of betrayal looming over us." Her face fell, and for a moment I saw the flicker of regret in her eyes. "Please don't do this, we can work on it, I can change," she pleaded. I shook my head, feeling a wave of sadness wash over me. "It's too late for that, Sarah. I can't pretend that everything is okay. I've lost trust in you, and I can't build a future on broken promises." As I spoke, I felt a sense of finality settle over me. I was no longer the man who would accept betrayal without question. I was a man who valued himself enough to walk away. "I hope you find what you're looking for," I added softly, my heart aching for the love we once shared, but I knew that this was the right decision for me. With that, I turned to leave, dragging my suitcase behind me. Each step felt lighter, a testament to the freedom I was reclaiming. I opened the front door, stepping out into the cool night air, and for the first time in days I felt a sense of relief wash over me. I was stepping into the unknown, but it was a journey I was ready to embrace. I would no longer be defined by someone else's choices. I would find my way, and I would emerge stronger on the other side. The first few days after leaving felt like stepping into a new world, one that was both exhilarating and terrifying. I had rented a small apartment not far from our house, a modest space that smelled faintly of fresh paint and new beginnings. It was a blank canvas, a place where I could redefine myself and start over. As I settled into my new routine, I found solace in the small things, the quiet of my own space, the ability to make my own choices without the weight of someone else's decisions pressing down on me. I spent my days unpacking boxes and arranging furniture, and with each item I placed, I felt a little more at home. But the nights were the hardest. Alone in that unfamiliar space, I often found myself grappling with memories of Sarah, the laughter we shared, the intimate moments that had once felt so real. I missed the companionship, the comfort of having someone by my side, but the pain of betrayal was a constant reminder of why I had left. I spent hours reflecting on what had transpired, trying to make sense of it all. I realized that I had lost sight of my own needs in the marriage, prioritizing Sarah's happiness over my own. I had been so invested in making things work that I had ignored the signs of her discontent, the cracks that had formed in our foundation. But now, I was determined to focus on myself. I began to explore new hobbies, things I had set aside during our years together. I took up running, finding solace in the rhythm of my feet hitting the pavement. The physical exertion helped clear my mind, and with each mile, I felt a sense of liberation wash over me. I was reclaiming my body and my spirit, one step at a time. I also reached out to friends I had neglected during my marriage, reconnecting with people who had once been a vital part of my life. It felt good to laugh again, to share stories over drinks, and to remind myself that I was still capable of joy. They listened to my story without judgment, offering support and encouragement as I navigated this new chapter. As the days turned into weeks, I began to notice a shift within myself. The anger that had initially consumed me started to fade, replaced by a growing sense of acceptance. I had made the right decision by leaving, and while I still felt pain over the loss of my marriage, I was beginning to understand that it was okay to grieve what had been. One evening, as I sat on my balcony sipping a glass of wine, I found myself reflecting on the lessons I had learned. I had discovered a strength within me that I never knew existed. I had stood up for myself, faced my fears, and taken control of my life. In that moment of clarity, I realized that I was no longer the man who had been defined by his relationship. I was a survivor, someone who had emerged from the ashes of betrayal with newfound resilience. I had the power to shape my own future, and I was excited about the possibilities that lay ahead. But the journey wasn't without its challenges. There were moments when I would hear a song that reminded me of Sarah, or see a couple who looked like we once did, and a wave of sadness would wash over me. I had to remind myself that healing takes time, and it was okay to feel the weight of my emotions. I also began to consider what I wanted in my next relationship. I knew I had to be cautious, to ensure that I wouldn't fall into the same patterns again. Trust would need to be rebuilt, and I would have to be mindful of my own needs while also being open to the needs of a partner. The more I reflected, the more I felt ready to embrace the future. I had a newfound appreciation for the life I was creating, and I was excited about the prospect of love again, but this time, it would be on my terms. As I settled into this new phase of my life, I felt a sense of empowerment coursing through me. I had walked away from betrayal and emerged stronger, ready to take on whatever life had in store. I was no longer the man who had been cheated on. I was a man who had reclaimed his worth and was ready to embrace the journey ahead. As the weeks turned into months, I settled into a rhythm that felt both comforting and empowering. I had transformed my little apartment into a sanctuary, filled with reminders of my journey, my growth, and my newfound strength. The walls were adorned with photographs of friends and family, mementos from my travels, and quotes that inspired me. Each piece told a story of resilience, of moving forward, and of embracing life on my own terms. One evening, as I sat on my balcony watching the sunset, I realized how far I had come. The vibrant colors painted across the sky mirrored the changes in my life. I was no longer a man defined by betrayal. I was a man who had reclaimed his identity, who had learned to love himself first. The pain of the past had transformed into a source of strength, a reminder of my capacity to overcome obstacles. I had taken the time to heal, to reflect on my past relationship, and to understand what I truly wanted in my life moving forward. I had learned the importance of communication, of honesty, and of never compromising my self-worth. I was ready to open my heart again, but this time I would do so with caution and clarity. In the months that followed, I started dating again. It was a process that felt both exhilarating and daunting. I met new people, shared laughter, and experienced the thrill of connection. I was more discerning, willing to walk away from anything that didn't feel right. I had learned to trust my instincts, to value myself, and to recognize that love should never come at the cost of my dignity. There were moments when I thought of Sarah, but instead of pain, I felt a sense of closure. I understood that her choices were a reflection of her own struggles, not a reflection of my worth. I had given her my heart, and while she had broken it, I had the power to mend it and make it stronger. As I reflected on my journey, I felt a profound sense of gratitude. I was grateful for the lessons learned, for the strength I had discovered within myself, and for the love and support of the friends who had stood by me. I had emerged from the ashes of my past, not as a victim, but as a survivor, ready to embrace whatever life had in store. I had walked away from a relationship that no longer served me, and in doing so I had found my voice. I had proven to myself that I was not weak. I was strong enough to leave when love turned into betrayal. I had the courage to start anew, to build a life that reflected my values and desires. As I sat there watching the last rays of sunlight dip below the horizon, I felt a surge of hope and excitement for the future. I was ready for new adventures, new connections, and perhaps even new love. I knew that life would continue to throw challenges my way, but I was prepared to face them head-on. In the end, I had learned that true empowerment comes from within. It comes from knowing your worth, from standing up for yourself, and from being willing to walk away when necessary. I was no longer the man I once was. I was a man reborn, ready to embrace the beauty of life with open arms. And with that realization, I smiled, feeling the warmth of the evening breeze against my skin. I was free, and I was ready to embrace the journey ahead.